Drinks, food, art, fun. This is Hops and Spirits Kentucky.
Welcome into another edition of Hops and Spirits Kentucky. We got another great one for you this week as the calendar keeps rolling on, unfortunately. It never seems to slow down. We talk with Kentucky Senator Bourbon about some of their new releases and some of the fun things they have in store as they continue to build the brand. But first, some news and notes from around the state of Kentucky. Old Forester announced that Kentucky and Louisville native Melissa Rift has been named brand ambassador master taster. Rift will help continue the revitalization of Old Forester, the only bourbon to exist before, during, and after Prohibition, and the founding brand of Brown-Forman. Rift most recently held a leadership role at Beam Suntory and previously served as single barrel program director at Bullet Distilling. She started her career in the bourbon industry as a bourbon tour guide and has worked her way up. Congrats to her. Michter's Master Distiller Dan McKee and Michter's Master of Maturation Andrea Wilson have approved a release of Michter's 20-year Kentucky Straight Bourbon. Michter's distributors and importers will begin to ship the 2022 edition in early November. The last release of Michter's 20-year bourbon from the distillery occurred a year ago. The proof of this 2022 release is 114.2, and the suggested U.S. retail price for a 750 milliliter bottle is, hope you're sitting down for this one, $1,200. And last but not least, the signature dish of Louisville and Kentucky since 1926. What would that be? Well, that would be the hot brown. And Louisville Tourism has teamed up with more than a dozen local restaurants in the greater Louisville area to serve up the inaugural Louisville Hot Brown Week. The week will encourage locals and visitors to indulge in the famous dish by dining at participating restaurants, offering a $10 to $12 hot brown specials from October 24th through October 30th. For details and most up-to-date list of participating restaurants, visit hotbrownweek.com or follow at Hot Brown Week on Instagram. If you've ever had it, it's definitely unique to Kentucky. I'm not a big fan, but maybe you are. So if you're in the greater Louisville area or visiting, you should check out that as well. You should also check out our interview, because up next we talk with co-founder of Kentucky Senator Bourbon, Damon Thayer, about where the brand's headed, some new releases, and a whole lot more. Enjoy.
Remember to check out Hops and Spirits on social media at Hop Spirits, all one word, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also find Hops and Spirits on YouTube and at hopspirits.com.
Joining us here for the Q&A this week, he's kind of a repeat guest, but it's technically the first time here on the Hops and Spirits Kentucky podcast. We're welcoming back co-founder of Kentucky Senator Bourbon, Damon Thayer. Damon, welcome back.
Hey, it's great to be back. Thanks for having us again.
Well, absolutely. And it's, last time we were talking, I think it was just the first release was out. Now you're up to 3 and you've got a whole lot more planned. So I'm excited to see what you guys have in store for us. But before we get to that, for those that may not know you, I know you're an entrepreneur. You tend to stay busy. That's probably the best way to describe you, is you stay busy. So the Cliff Notes version of just a little bit about yourself.
Well, yeah, I've got a lot of things that keep me pretty active. I'm a member of the Kentucky State Senate, where I'm the Senate Majority Floor Leader. I represent the 17th District, and I live in Georgetown. And then I've got my own consulting business. I'm a marketing and business development consultant. And then I've also got a company called Half Century Equine Ventures, which invests in racehorse partnerships. And then along with my business partner, Andre Regard, I'm the co-founder of Kentucky Senator Spirits. So those are everybody's got to have a good side hustle. I feel like I've got 4 of them.
Well, and in some weird way, they all kind of work together, because who doesn't like the ability to maybe bring some bourbon along to some business meetings?
Yeah, I've got a business card that I hand out that says bourbon, horses, politics. I've kind of got the Kentucky trifecta covered.
You very much do. And, I know you've always kind of enjoyed bourbon, or at least, for a good while. And now that you're in it, why get into the business side of it, though? It's one thing to enjoy it and maybe, kind of maybe invest in something, but to actually take on a brand, why get into that?
That's a great question. I really didn't start drinking bourbon until my early 40s, right after I got divorced. And bourbon was an excellent companion during those early days. And so I didn't drink it much before then, but I was familiar with the story because in Frankfurt, we started to pass bills to remove artificial barriers to free enterprise, particularly for the bourbon business. So I started drinking bourbon casually, started collecting some bottles, and working with the Kentucky Distillers Association and folks in the distilling business. It's cool. It's full of great people, fun people who are easy to be around. And I have kind of an entrepreneurial streak. My parents were entrepreneurs. I grew up in Michigan and moved to Kentucky 30 years ago to work at Turfway Park in Northern Kentucky. I'm a marketing and communications guy by trade. And, my dad, during the Carter malaise of the late 70s, that was Jimmy Carter's term, not mine. I'm trying he called it a malaise. It was a great recession. My dad quit his job working in the factory in Bay City, Michigan, and moved us up to a converted hunting cabin that in Grayling, Michigan, up in northern Michigan, not the Upper Peninsula, the northern lower peninsula right here. If you're from Michigan, you show where you live or where you're from. It's called the Mitten. My parents had purchased this hunting cabin from my grandmother after my grandfather died in 71 and converted it into a house for us to live in. And my dad quit his job to move up there and start his own machine shop. So, my dad, ran it. And my mom was the bookkeeper. And so I guess I probably inherited an entrepreneurial spirit from them. And so in 2017, I just sort of stumbled onto this lapsed bourbon brand called Kentucky Senator, and it had a cool logo with an eagle on it, with a couple of twigs from a tree in its beak. And you can see the old logo at our website, KentuckySenatorBourbon.com. It's on our homepage. And I thought, wow, this would be kind of cool to restore this brand. And, I knew the Pinhook guys, Jamie Hill from the horse racing side of the business, because they run Bourbon Lane Stables. And I thought that it was a cool idea that they had about naming each release for one of their Bourbon Lane racing racehorses. And so I got this idea, why not try to resurrect this brand and name each release after U.S. senators from Kentucky? There's like 56 of them. And so I went to my good friend, Andre Rigard, who happened to be my lawyer for my other business entities. I said, hey, I want to bring back this bourbon brand. I'm super naive about it. But I knew I needed a lawyer. I said, can you help me, get legal with all this stuff? And he said, how about this? Let's be 50-50 partners. And he said to me, you do the marketing and branding. And he said, I'll do all the legal work and we'll figure everything else out. And that's kind of what we did. It took a while. I mean, it's not an easy business to get into. And all the people who are getting into the business, whether they're non-distiller producers like us or people building their own distillery, or people doing blending like my friend Tony Milburn up in Northern Kentucky with the new Wenzel whiskey. It's not an easy business to get into. There are a lot of legal and licensing hoops to jump through. So the first thing we did is Andre applied for the trademark to Kentucky Senator Bourbon. And you have to go through the United States Patent Administration. And you have to wait 6 months to see if anybody objects to you having the patent. And we didn't know what would happen because the brand started back in the early part of the 20th century up in Covington with the Krigler and Krigler distillery. And then somehow, we don't know how, but it got sold to Double Springs Distillers in Bardstown. And so, we were waiting to see if somebody would claim it. Nobody did. So we own the trademark to Kentucky Senator Bourbon and Kentucky Senator Spirits. And then, we had to form an LLC, all the usual things you have to do to start a business in Kentucky. And then there are multiple licensing things that you have to go through, local, state, and federal. You're going to go through the TTB and all that. And that takes time. Then, so we had to develop a brand, get it licensed. Then we had to get investors. We had to find people who wanted to invest in our idea. And, that took time. And Then we had to find the bourbon, and that was the really difficult. And because it says Kentucky Senator on the label, we passed a bill many, many years ago that I voted for that says if it says Kentucky on the label, Kentucky Senator, Kentucky Owl, Kentucky Gentleman, it has to be Kentucky juice. So, there's all this great MGP juice out there, and, New Riff and Boone County and lots of others, Magnus, they've used MGP to launch their brands. We can't do that because MGP is made across the Ohio River in Indiana. So we went through some stops and starts on finding the juice. And then, it just kind of all came together, oddly enough, during COVID. We got the investors, we found some bourbon, and that's another story. And then we had to, buy bottles and corks and seals and find a place to do labels. And it just kind of all came together. And we were able to launch with our first release out in February of 2021 while COVID was still raging.
Well, it is funny sometimes you don't realize the things that you have to go through, and even just the simple thing of where to get the bourbon because of the name, but it's worked out for you, and you went. Obviously, you guys went the NDP, the non-distilling route. Why go that route? Obviously, like you said, there's a lot of good ones out there, but some nowadays like to maybe contract distill their own stuff, things like that. Why kind of go the sourcing route?
So, as you know, there are three ways you can be in the bourbon business. You can be an NDP, sourcing bourbon. You can be a contract distiller, or you can have your own distillery. We just felt like the easiest way for entry into the marketplace was as an NDP and a source. But that's phase one, and we are working on phase two. We're doing a fundraise so we can go to an existing distillery and do contract bourbon. So that's phase two, and we're hoping to get that going in the next 6 to 12 months. We're finalizing all the paperwork, doing the pro formas, et cetera. All of our original investors have really enjoyed it, and they want to step up and help us, raise capital to do phase two. So we're doing all that, trying to find a contract distiller. That's not easy because guess what? A lot of the people who do contract distilling are booked because, back in the day before the current bourbon boom, many of the big guys in the bourbon business, they engaged in contract distilling because the demand for bourbon wasn't high. But now that the demand is off the charts, all the big guys have pretty much gotten out of the contract distilling business because they need the capacity for their own brands. So there are, new players coming onto the scene all the time to do contract distilling. The big ones right now are Castle and Key and Bardstown Bourbon Company, and great companies, by the way. We've got bourbon aging at Bardstown Bourbon Company right now, but they're pretty much full for the next several years on their capacity. So while we're putting together our pitch and raising the money, we're also working on finding a distillery that we can partner with for phase two. But we're still going to be in phase one for a while with several different purchases of sourced bourbon that we're aging for future releases. So we'll be continue to play in the sourced bourbon space for a while, and hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months be able to lay down our own juice for 4 or 5 years down the road. Because when we do the contract juice, we will age for at least 4 years, maybe longer, depending on our ability to, find sourced bourbon to, continue to build the brand and have at least an annual release. So, I look at what Ken Lewis has done up at New Riff. He launched the brand with OKI using MGP juice, and then, of course, he built a distillery up there on the banks of Ohio, and it's an amazing place, and they're putting amazing bourbon too. And they aged New Riff there and launched their new brand, and they age it 4 years and then release it, and it's magical stuff. We'd kind of like to do a similar model, except we'd be in the contract space, not own our own distillery. That's not a step we're willing to take just yet.
I was going to say the downside of the bourbon industry is time and money, and it takes a lot of both to get where you want. And, how has it been sourcing? Because like you said, you ran into some obstacles because one, at the time, you kind of didn't realize, I think when we talked the first time, you had to, because of the name, in the law on the book, you almost kind of overlooked that for a second and then went, I got to have it from Kentucky. And how has that been sourcing everything?
Yeah, it's a funny story. We had a great line on some amazing MGP juice that was aging in Kentucky. And then I was talking to my friend Eric Gregory, who runs the Kentucky Distillers Association. He said, don't you remember you voted for a bill several years ago that says if it's Kentucky on the label, you have to have Kentucky juice? So I'm like, smack my head. I vote on thousands and thousands of bills in my 20 years in the Senate, and I'd forgotten about that. So he reminded me, and we had to put the skids on the MGP and start from scratch. So it's been a really interesting journey. We've been very lucky. On our first release, which is a 15-year bourbon with the brand of Alvin Barkley, Senator Alvin Barkley, U.S. Senator. He served as both minority and majority leader in the U.S. Senate. He was vice president of the United States under Harry S. Truman. Lake Barkley is named for him. We got really lucky because the timing worked out where our money came in from our investors, and we got a line from a broker on buying a tote of 15-year bourbon. And they sent us a sample of bourbon from one tote that was 114 proof. We tasted it. We called them back and we said, we'll take it because you have to move quickly in the sourced bourbon world. And they said, well, we already sold the 114 proof, but we'll sell you a tote of 107. And we said, we'll take that. And so we got really lucky with the tote of just some amazing bourbon. So we started out at 107 proof, and we decided that we're gonna sell all of our Kentucky Senator at 107. That's the traditional barrel proof. There's a couple of Pappies at 107. Weller Antique is 107. Baker's 7 years 107. So we kind of made that a part of our brand and bottled this juice back in January of 2021. And we have a great bottling partnership with Sam Rock and his team at Bluegrass Distillers here in Lexington. We formed a partnership with Kentucky Eagle. They are the Anheuser-Busch distributor here in central and south central Kentucky, but they were looking to expand their wine and spirits portfolio statewide. So we got in at a good time with them as they're trying to expand their bourbon portfolio, and they've done a terrific job. And we bottled up about 1,300 bottles, excuse me, and it sold really well. It won an Ascot Award for taste. It's gotten great reviews from bloggers and bourbon influencers and people like Fred Minnick. We were named the 42nd best whiskey of 2021, and we were the highest rated 15-year-old bourbon last year. So we were really lucky landing that tote. We're pretty sure we know where it came from, but the brokers never say so, but I'm pretty sure it was from Jim Beam, and I'm pretty sure it was Knob Creek 15-year. So we like to be very transparent with our customers. So I don't mind telling you that. Again, I can't confirm it, but we're pretty sure that's what it was. We just got lucky. And sometimes in life, just being in the right place at the right time. What did Mark Twain say? 80% of success is just going up. And I like to say the other 20% is knowing what to do when you get there. And so we were able to take advantage of it.
Well, and now, like you said, you've gotten to the point where you actually have barrels sitting and waiting, which I'm sure is got to be a relief in this day and age with everything. So how has that gone since? Because now you're able to actually have some stuff, you're putting stuff away. You already kind of know where things are going a little bit in terms of those yearly releases.
Yeah, that's right. Right after the first release came out, we were able to buy 25 barrels of 6-year-old distillate. Again, the broker couldn't confirm where it came from, but we're pretty sure that it's Barton juice from Sazerac down in Bardstown. The Barton 1792. There's a lot of that out there, and it's terrific. They sent us the sample. We loved it, and we bought 25 barrels. And so what we do now, we're kind of settling into an annual release around June, like to hit right before the July 4th Independence Day holiday, because we kind of have that kind of patriotic theme. So we pulled 6 barrels. Liquor Barn decided that they wanted to do a single barrel. So Brad Williams comes over to Bluegrass Distillers. We have the 6 barrels. Brad does a barrel pick, and he selects a single barrel that's going to be available in all the Liquor Barn, Party Mart, and Depth stores throughout Kentucky. They're obviously a big retail supporter of ours. And then the other 5 are blended together. Everything's proof down to 107, and then sold. So that was the 6-year release that came out in June of 2021. It also won a gold award for taste from the Ascot Awards that Fred Minnick does. So this is the second release. It's a 6-year bourbon, and we named it for William J. DeBow, who was the first Republican to serve as a U.S. Senator from Kentucky. There haven't been very many Republicans until the last 50 years. And we named it for him because he was a one-termer, and a term in the U.S. Senate is 6 years. So it's a 6-year bourbon. So that's why we did that as the second release. And then earlier this year, we aged that bourbon another year, and we released our third release, which is a 7-year bourbon. It is named for Senator John G. Carlisle. He's a Democrat from Covington, and he was the father of the Bottled and Bond Act. So Andre had a great idea. This is the 125th anniversary of the Bottled and Bond Act. We don't have any Bottled and Bond bourbon yet, but we thought we'd name our release for Senator Carlisle. And it's amazing, Jonathan. This is really good juice, the 6-year, but the 7-year, that extra year of aging has really reaped its rewards. Now the Angels got about 10%. So we got about 100 fewer bottles than we forecasted for our business plan, which is kind of a bummer, but the bourbon tastes great, and it's been really well received. And we've got, so that leaves us with 13 barrels left from that. So the plan is to do in June of 2023 an 8-year release, and then in June of 2024 a 9-year release. Then that will leave us 1 barrel, and so we're going to wait another year, and we'll do a special true single barrel, so maybe 120 140 bottles depending on evaporation and the Angels and how greedy they are, but we're kind of excited about that. And that will then take care of these 25 barrels that we bought. Again, we think it's Barton juice, can't confirm. We just know that it's really good. We've gotten great reviews. And you can find some really good tasting notes on our webpage or Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our friends at the Bourbon News have done some really cool tasting notes, graphics on our bourbon, and those are available on all of our social media.
Well, I was going to say, obviously with release 2, 3, kind of 4 and 5, there'll be the similarity because they're all kind of coming from the same place. But obviously that first one didn't. It's possible other ones that other barrels that you're able to get won't come from those same places either. How do you balance kind of that tasting profile? Because obviously it's going to be a little different every time, but I'm guessing you still want to keep it in a roundabout realm so people know what to expect when they're getting Kentucky Senator.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'll just, full disclosure, we've got 50 barrels of Green River bourbon aging down in Owensboro. It's currently 3 years and 2 months old. And fortuitously for us, the timing is going to be great because when we are out of the juice that is in these 2 bottles, that Green River juice will be about 5 years old. And so, then we'll move into the latter, what we call phase 1, where we're still sourcing, and we'll start bottling up the Green River juice. So number one, all of these bourbons that we've sourced are high rye bourbons. All the releases from the first release, which is 1 bourbon mash bill, to 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, which is going to be another, and then 7th will be another. They're going to be high rye bourbons. Right now we're at 75, 21, and 4 on the mash bill on the current bourbon. Secondly, that's another reason for proofing everything to 107. So there's at least a consistency on the proof, and we don't hide from the fact that we're an NDP sourced bourbon, and that our bourbon comes from different places. But I think we can say that, look, there's a consistency in proof, and for people who like high proof bourbons, we should be one of your go-tos. And even at 107, it's not too high, but it's still, anything above 100 is considered pretty high proof. So that's kind of the way we're going. Who knows what we'll do down the line once we start contracting? Who knows? Maybe we'll try a wheated recipe, or maybe we'll stick with the high rye. We haven't gotten quite there yet. It depends on which distiller we choose, and whoever the master distiller is that we work with, to kind of get their input as well. But so far, the high rye bourbon has been pretty well received, and the 107 proof has been well received.
Well, no, I was going to say, I mean, clearly you're doing something right, because you're still getting all these honors, and it's been, like I said, 2 different ages or 3 different ages, a couple different places that it's come from. So clearly you guys have at least a good palate for what you're searching for. And what's it like to get those accolades?
It's very cool, and I wish I could show you the trophies we've won from the Fred Minnick Ascot Awards, but they're at our photographer Richie Wireman's studio, because he's going to do some cool photography with the trophies to put on our social media and website. And we also won a double platinum for the marketing and branding, which I was pretty proud of that, because that's my role in the company. And I'm a comms guy. I come from a marketing, promotions, PR, branding background. So it's pretty cool. I mean, honestly, I hoped when we started that we would have been at this point. But you know how hopes and dreams are, right? I mean, that's why they call them hopes and dreams, and you hope they come true. It started as just kind of a hobby. Our investors thought it would be really cool to be involved in the bourbon space, but we've actually done really well with the bourbon, and getting ready to move to that next phase. And I think when you can say to investors and consumers that, hey, we've got bourbon that's gotten great accolades, great reviews, it's won awards, we've got a pretty cool brand, and there's a lot of new brands coming into the bourbon space, which is great. I'm all for competition, but I think our brand is unique. We like to say that we're selling great Kentucky bourbon with a side of Kentucky history, and people like that. We've got a lot of history here in Kentucky, and we tell a little bit of it on the back of each bottle, and then there's a QR code or a website, our website that you can go to get the full on 2-page bio for each senator. It's pretty cool. And part of the fun for me as a history buff is researching the senators and deciding who we're going to do next. And it's something that Andre and I work on. Maybe someday we'll do an online contest and get input from people to see what they think. But it's been really cool, and we're gonna scale up now, and eventually, once we scale up, we'll have bigger releases, more widely distributed in Kentucky. Maybe we'll go to some other states, depending on how much of that Green River juice we decide to release. We have 50 barrels, so right now we pull 6 barrels a year. Maybe when we get to the Green River juice, maybe we pull 10 or 15 or 20, and it'll be a younger bourbon to start out with, a 5-year, so it'll be a lower price point, and it'll be more widely distributed. So we're going to scale up and try to get it into the hands of more people and make it more available and accessible. And in the meantime, we're trying to build a brand. Right now, we're in the super premium space. It's generally on the top shelf or behind the cash out register, below the glass at Liquor Barn. We're trying to build that brand in the super premium space, but eventually, as we scale up, it will become more widely available at a lower price point and more accessible to people.
Well, and you touched on this there, the history of it and everything in terms of being able to showcase the senators that, serve from Kentucky in DC. And how do you go about selecting those? I know a little bit has been kind of based on the year statement. And then obviously this last one was more maybe in honor of what the person had done in Carlisle. But how do you go about selecting and how does that process work?
I've got a couple books on Kentucky history, and there's a book out that has a bio of every U.S. senator. I read that. I go online, Wikipedia, do research. I've got a couple friends of mine, Will Turwart in Northern Kentucky, Tommy Druin here in Georgetown. They're even bigger history buffs than I am, and they've given me some suggestions. With Barkley, we wanted to launch big, and he is one of the, and I'm a Republican, he's a Democrat. It's funny, I'm a pro bourbon, pro horse racing Republican state senator. He was for prohibition and against gambling and a Democrat, and we still chose him to be our first because we're trying to be bipartisan here. But he was a big figure in our history, one of the greatest U.S. senators and most accomplished U.S. senators in Kentucky history. The second release, we were trying to be a little cheap. We want to go Democrat, Republican, and kind of go back and forth to ecumenical or bipartisan. So we wanted a Republican for the second release, and we had 6-year bourbon. So trying to be a little cheeky, taking the one-termer. On the third release, Andre had the great idea of, it's the 125th year of the Bottled and Bond Act. Why not choose Carlisle? I'll give you a little bit of a scoop. So our next release will be in June, and would like to use a Republican. But the problem is there aren't a lot of Republicans to choose from until the last 50 years. And there's a law that says if someone has been dead 50 years or less, you cannot use their name, image, or likeness for promotional purposes unless you get permission of their trust or their family. So I'd kind of like to use John Sherman Cooper, who was a great U.S. senator from down in Somerset, was big on foreign policy. And Mitch McConnell was once his intern and inspiration for becoming a U.S. senator. So I've got a lead on potentially tracking down a granddaughter of Senator John Sherman Cooper, and we're going to talk to her about getting permission to use his image on one of our releases. My political mentor is the late Senator Jim Bunning from Northern Kentucky. I've already got permission from his family to use him on one of our releases, and we will do so at some point in the future. So, I think there are 56 U.S. senators from Kentucky, and all but two of them are deceased. The only two living U.S. senators are the two current occupants of the office, Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul, because in the last few years, we've lost Jim Bunning. Very sad. I attended that funeral. He was a big person in my life. But we've also lost Wendell Ford, Dee Huddleston. There's lots to choose from, but different hoops that you got to jump through. And, we choose just based on different circumstances. Like I said, at some point, maybe when we scale up, maybe when we start using the Green River juice, maybe we'll do a contest, put some options out there on the internet and let people vote to get more people involved.
I was gonna say, I love the history lesson. I love it though.
It's pretty fun. I got to be honest. It's pretty fun to bring these people who have played a role in Kentucky's history one way or the other. DeBow was a little more obscure, but when I was researching him, I mean, he was a doctor, a lawyer, a school superintendent, went to med school at U of L, served in the state Senate. He was from Crittenden County in West Kentucky. So even some of these guys that people haven't heard of, they all played a role in our history because they represented us in Washington, D.C.
Well, like I said, the tagline of good bourbon with a side of history is really cool, and it's something that people can hold on to and learn a little bit as well. And as you guys move forward, you've touched on this. Obviously, you're looking to scale up, looking to maybe get into the work with some folks on some contract distilling. What is next for y'all? Obviously, the yearly releases are going to keep coming in June, but what's the ultimate hope here is that you can say and share?
Well, so number one, the plan for annual releases, and then transitioning into the Green River juice once it gets to about 5 years old. But we always reserve the right, if we get lucky and are able to land some aged bourbon that's ready to roll, that we could decide to do a bottling at any other time. It takes right now, I got to tell you, one of the challenges is getting bottles. There's a real glass shortage. And, during the pandemic, Woodford stopped selling double oak for a while because they couldn't find the squat bottles, the little squat bottles. They're back in business now. Brown-Forman's a big company. They know how to figure out how to source that stuff. But we've got glass in storage, so we're not hobbled by that right now. But if we landed some other source juice, it would take about 2 months to turn around. We'd have to design the label, get the label printed, get a date on the calendar of Bluegrass Distillers to do the bottling. So there's always that possibility that we could turn on a dime and do another release. But, for the long term, we want to get into the contract space and probably lay down 500 barrels. And, maybe it's 100 barrels at one place, couple hundred somewhere else, or maybe we can find a place that can do all 500. And then that gives us a lot of options in terms of scaling up, and as well as aging, because I don't want to sell any bourbon that's less than 4 years old. And I will, even though you're not required to put an aging statement on a bourbon once it turns 4, our bourbon will always have an aging statement on it. I just like that transparency. So you're going to see us remain strong in the sourcing category for a while, and then eventually move to phase 2, where we're in the contract space. But again, you're not going to see any contract distillate from us for 4 or 5 years, because A, we got to raise the money, which we're in the process of doing. B, we've got to find a partner to contract with. We're in the process of doing that. And then we've got to age it. And like I said, we're not going to go to market with anything under 4 years old. So, I think you know what to expect from us for the next few years, but there's always the possibility for a surprise if we're able to, land some good source juice that's made in Kentucky. And that means filled, bottled, and aged here.
Now, I also have to ask this because the business name is Kentucky Senator Spirits. Any other thoughts of other spirits, or is it always going to be bourbon?
That's a good question. Yes, I mean, there is always the possibility of us perhaps doing a rye. And, for trademark purposes, I can't divulge too much, but that's a possibility. There's also the possibility of us going into other states. Again, for proprietary reasons, I can't really go into that too much, but there are always the possibility for brand extensions there. That's a marketing buzzword. And yeah, that's a very good question, Jonathan. And again, as we scale up and our cash position improves, there's always the possibility for brand extensions.
I like it. A little tease, and also good to, market. That must be that marketing background of yours, always leaving yourself an open door to adventure out into. And
it's Tom's degree from Michigan State. I'm a Sparty. We're a basketball school now because our football team sucks after having a great season last year. But I'm a loyal Sparty, and it's a great comms degree. I got there way back in the old days when I was a college student.
Well, and it seems to be working well for you in the business world too, and in the bourbon world of that, with some good juice, some good product, great history. And Damon, I really appreciate you sharing the story of Kentucky Senator Bourbon and kind of the future of it.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's fun to tell the story. We love doing your podcast. We want customers and future customers to understand where we're coming from. You help us get that message out there. And, we like to be very transparent when it comes to our bourbon. We're always going to have an aging statement on it. I've been pretty forthright with you on where we think our bourbon came from. I like people to know that. And it's a lot of fun. It's not a cheap business to be in. You also have to have patience, because of the aging process. And you also have to understand that there's a lot of government red tape, licensing, multiple government layers there to go through. I let Andre deal with that. He's good at that. But it's a lot of fun, and we want to make more fans. We encourage people, if you get a chance to buy our bourbon, buy 2 bottles, 1 to drink, 1 to keep, because we're starting a nice vertical collection. And for the people who still have our 15-year first release, I think that's probably going to be pretty valuable on the secondary market. And those who have a collection are probably going to be rewarded for it if they choose to participate in the secondary market. But it also looks really good on a shelf.
I was going to say, it's one that you can always spark a conversation with. And as you said, though, these are limited releases, and once they are gone, they are gone.
They're gone. And, one of the best things about bourbon is it's a great conversation starter. And it was one of the reasons why I was so intrigued working with a lot of the bourbon barons like Bill Samuels and Chris Morris, Jimmy Russell, in Frankfurt in my other job. Just the great stories and the conversation that it provokes. And so we think with our nod to history, we kind of continue bourbon as a great conversation starter and conversation piece.
Well, and I think you've hit that. And Damon, thanks again. And we look forward to talking to you down the road.
Thanks for having us, Jonathan. We really appreciate it.